Hello, I'm ToyCat, and welcome back to the A to Z of Geography. Today we're on our 10th day, which means we're going to be talking about the most populated country in the world for the letter J, and I'll be honest, it's a place most of you haven't heard of. It's this small island just off the coast of China and the Korean Peninsula, and apparently it's called Japan. It's something that I didn't know about till recently, but apparently it's famous for its cartoons, and its imperial history, and its degenerate culture of weirdos on the internet who like to believe that it's so much better there despite never having been themselves and not really understanding things fully. And so that is something that is very interesting. But more seriously, the reason Japan interests so many people is the fact that it has so many different places and cultures that have all kind of merged together and projected to the world a huge image of that makes it so different to the world. Many other cultures dream of what Japan has achieved, not just in terms of their cultural win in so many ways in the world, but also in terms of the empire that it had. It had one of the biggest empires, in fact the very biggest empire for an Asian country in the modern era. Look how much territory was once under control of just these small few islands here, and how exactly was any of that possible? Well, let's talk about the borders of Japan, let's talk about the way it has subdivided itself, and let's talk, more importantly, about its future, because they're all very scary, very serious topics, and I think it's interesting today. So yeah, first things first, obviously Japan has its big capital city, which is Tokyo, the most populated city on the planet, and also Japan has no borders because it's an island nation, so this section should be short, right? Japan is an island nation with a population density similar to that of Sri Lanka, and so as a result, it would be impossible for them to have any border disputes, right? Except somehow they do, with not just one, but two of the largest countries on planet Earth, because, fun fact, they have a huge border dispute with Russia and a huge one with China. How can that be possible for an island country? Well, first things first, Japan is technically not an island, it's sort of an archipelago. Most people think of Japan, and they're thinking of Kanto, that is the biggest island. It is the second most populated on Earth, if I'm not mistaken, with about 40 million people living there, and I'll be honest, I know the name because of Pokemon games, but that's a cultural point we can make later. But it's actually made up of 6 main islands. Hokkaido is the most noticeable one on a map, this huge island up here, but there are 5 islands that make up the southern tip of the mainland, and because Japan has always had goals of having this huge empire, and indeed has succeeded, you know what Indonesia is today? Japan was Indonesia, and the Philippines, and all the Japanese islands, and all of this other stuff, because they had such a huge empire. And so as that empire slowly collapses in, the question of what is Japanese and what is a colony restarts to become true, and so you get lots of weird cases of islands that really feel like they probably shouldn't be Japan. I mean, already by the time you get to Okinawa, which is a entirely native group of people that just is very, very far away from Japan, you're like, oh, that's interesting that that's Japanese, right? But then it goes further west to the point where you're like, there are some like subtropical islands here that are fully Japanese. The same thing happens as you go towards Korea. It's like, okay, so there's these islands that are slightly closer towards Korea than Japan. Which country do they belong to? I'll give you a spoiler on that one. It's in the Nagasaki area of Japan. So there's an interesting question with regards to where should Japan end logically, and apparently that leads to disputes. Most of these disputes are pretty harmless. Like, they have a big dispute with Russia. Japan and Russia have never truly gotten along, to say the least. The moment either one is weak, the other one pounces and tries to get some concessions. And so one of the interesting parts of that concession is that basically they have agreed multiple times what the sea border between them should be. There is this big island here that is Russia, fun fact. There is this big island here that is Japan. These are the things which have been certain over time. And then there's this peninsula over here, which, side note, I just want to point out, this peninsula, anywhere else on the planet, a place this big would have like 30 million people. It's the size of like Italy. It would have its whole own culture, be its own country in the UN, but it's just a random territory of Russia. But anyway, long story short, this is Russia, this is Japan. Where is the line in between? Well, I'll consult this handy dandy map, which tells us that, okay, in 1875, they said that Japan would get it all. In 1855, Russia kind of got most of it besides these islands. In 1945, Japan said it gave up its claim on the islands, but it didn't recognize the Russians' claim, and no one recognizes the Russians' claims. And so in exchange, Russia said, okay, how about we give you these islands here, these 2 islands, and then you finally just recognize we own the rest. Let's just settle this, let's be done. And Japan said, nah, I don't like that idea a lot. And so now there's just a bunch of islands that thankfully have no huge populations that I can spot, that just exist between Japan and Russia. And I think that's fascinating. Again, this part of the world, admittedly, it's pretty cold, maybe not the best to settle, but the fact that there's effectively no one on these fairly big islands, there's just random airstrips, it looks like, and small bases like that, absolutely fascinating to me. The amount of planet Earth, people who say that we have no space left on planet Earth, don't realize the extent that we have islands and indeed even like main parts of land that just have no one for forever to see. Like Russia, if they grew their population by 50 times overnight, they still would probably have, also look, there's a place called Esso here, that's fun, but yeah, they would still have a peninsula like this, which is just a few people living in the corner of it, like, oh look, there's a little town here, that's nice, and then what's there on the rest of the peninsula? Basically nothing. It's insane to me. Anyway, and so that is the border dispute they have with Russia. The border dispute they have with China is a similar vein. Basically, Russia and Japan slowly took over the area, including Taiwan. Taiwan was a Japanese colony. In fact, wait, was it a Japanese colony? Don't trust me, trust this handy-dandy map right here, including all of this stuff. And basically, because of that, when they eventually gave Taiwan back, maybe they didn't give the islands around it back. And so there's a really interesting line to draw, which is when is an island Taiwanese and when is an island, like a Japanese. And so stuff like this, it's like, okay, that's Taiwan, and then you get the question of China. And so if there was an island, let's say right about here, there'd be a really interesting question as to, is that Japanese, is that Taiwanese, or is it Chinese? And so, good thing there aren't any islands, I'm just kidding, there's islands here, right? And so, fun thing, these islands, which are closer to Japan, but via Japan's islands, than they are to mainland China or to Taiwan, these islands have a very interesting issue because at the time they were discovered, Japan just said, it's terra nullius, it belongs to no one, and so it's ours. And China went along with that. And then, fun fact, in 1970 or so, I think we were looking for this weird dinosaur juice in the ground, and you know what? They found oil there, and now all three nations are like, that's our oil, and the other nations are like, nope, that's our oil. And interestingly enough, a lot of countries would have big wars over this, and China officially tries to claim it as theirs, and Japan tries to claim it as theirs, but because none of the three countries are extracting any of those resources, or indeed even looking for them, it solves the dispute. I think if one country was actively in there taking what the other countries see as their resource, it'd be something, but if all three countries leave it in the ground, then we can deal with that in the future, probably to mainland China's benefit, but that's an interesting point that is happening right now. Also, it's just so fun to me that like Taiwan and China have to get in a territorial dispute, both being like, but it's our China's version of this, and then Japan's just there like, but it's our island. We all agreed it was our island before there was oil, and ultimately, all of their claims seem a little bit silly, but those are the somehow territorial disputes that an island nation has. Fun fact. Anyway, speaking of fun facts, you might find it fun to see how Japan is run. Japan is divided into 47 prefectures. These prefectures vary hugely in size and basically go way back to the samurai era of Japan, as it was effectively a bunch of different kingdoms which controlled their own little areas. They eventually merged together into one country, and the prefectures are just kind of a show off the fact that, yeah, they all used to be very distinctly different. To the world, Japan projects that, yeah, there is one Japanese culture. Look, we are Pokemon and anime and blah, 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 blah. Like that's all of us. We do it so well. But ultimately, it all actually comes from very different places, and so they actually divide them into 47 prefectures, and these colors right here loosely show the regions which they're divided into. Interestingly enough, the prefectures do have some level of self-governance, as you could probably expect, but Japan was trying to merge them together to make really a federated state of Japan. Just 20 years ago, they were trying to make it so there would be a region for the north where the snow is, and Hokkaido, which is also snowy, but less so and more interestingly like island culture. Everyone in Japan, the rest of Japan seems to be fascinated by Hokkaido and its weird out there culture. It's maybe like the Scotland of Japan, if you want to say it that way. Obviously, we have over here the Tokyo region. This is the very densely populated area. Japan is losing people from all over the country, but not in Tokyo. Then you've got the very mountainous region near Niigata and all of this stuff. Then we've got, down as we come closer here, an interesting other island. This one is connected to the mainland via a few bridges, but it makes it intriguing and different in its own way if you want to see an island. There is the island all the way to the south here, where indeed, things start to get a lot warmer. I found it fascinating. I have been to Japan a few times personally. This area felt the least like the rest of Japan. It felt like more Hawaii to my vibes, even though I went to Hawaii. It's got a very interesting kind of tropical note that suddenly hits you right there. Kyoto, this area right here is where Kyoto and Osaka are. This is indeed a different part of Japan, and my biggest point of proof as to how different Japan is. You might think like, okay, so how different can a country really be internally? You can try and tell me all you like that the states of Germany are different, but to me, they're all Germans. But here's the point of proof for you. If you just believe that the UN decides where culture starts and ends, and the idea of a country is where that is, in Osaka, unlike the rest of Japan, they stand on the right of the escalator. Wait, on the left of the escalator? They stand on a different side of the escalator just in Japan. That's insane. For people who actually use trains out there, sorry, Americans in my audience, but that is absolute insanity that they could flip something so fundamental as the side that you walk on. It's the equivalent of having a state in America where you drove on the left side of the road. And yeah, if that hasn't convinced you, I don't know what will. Also, something that's interesting, just while we're talking about this region, is all of the airports around here are made on reclaimed land. So this is Kobe Airport. As you can see, they didn't just have an airport-sized piece of land, they made it from scratch, and it's really cool because they did the same for Osaka Airport, or at least the international airport. I think there's one that's not on reclaimed land. This is the most fascinating place to go on a bridge, and if I can show you what it looks like, it is just weird as you're going over and you're like, oh, yeah, the airport is just this island, and that works? Yes, that works. It blew my mind. And yeah, the fact that Japan has so many major cities like this, and they all are fairly close together, is one of the reasons that they have a big, fancy, fast train running between them, and they'll be the first country to have magic magnetic trains. The fact that even while I'm talking about very related things like prefectures, I am talking about these things, shows that Japan has a cultural influence, right? That really exceeds not only its population, but also its economy size. What's the deal with that? Well, what if I answered a different question, such as, what's the deal with Japan's future? Here is the population pyramid for Indonesia. I want to show you this again because this is a very healthy country. They have a very slight declining birth rate, but overall their population looks healthy. If it is going to dip down, it's going to dip down at very, very minor rates that could be easily adjusted for. And so this is a country with a very healthy population pyramid. It's like a population bar more than a pyramid, and it only starts to pyramid out as people get too old to work. This is the ideal. What's the opposite of ideal? Well, this. Oh my god. So there's two things to point out here. One is the fact that Japan's largest age group is 50 to 54, followed by 45 to 49. So they've got a lot of people who are coming to the end of their working life, but then there's a huge boom of people who are 70 to 74. Japan has a ridiculous number of retirees. They have over 122,000 women above the age of 100. That is an insane stat, by the way. But the fact that they have so many people who are in this age place, but also very few babies, is a problem. As a not very pro-immigration country, it becomes an issue when your generation shrinks slowly successively. Every generation is about 10% smaller than the one that came before, at least as you measure every 5 years here, and that causes a lot of issues with how do you balance the number of schools you have versus retirement homes, etc., etc. But the bigger one is this population graph. As you can see, in 1950, Japan had about 80 million people. They've grown a lot since then, it's great, but we're reaching peak Japan right now as their population has started shrinking. They had 5 million more people just 10 years ago, and that number is going to drastically drop over the next century. In your lifetime, you will witness a Japan that has a lower population than the United Kingdom, than Germany, than France, maybe even, if I could say something so drastic. This is a big problem. It's one of the very biggest problems, and how do you resolve it? I don't know. There's a lot of things that have been done to talk about birth rates, and I was going to show you some of those, but what might be more fun is if I show you the fact that bear attacks are at a record high because of the aging population. So, I mean, if the more bears that attack you, the more children you might have. More seriously, Japan has tried lots of things for fertility. They are a country of like lots of fertility measures, a fertility day. Fun fact, this is unrelated, but I'm one of those people who went to Japan and can't resist telling you about the weird things I saw. I was there on March 14th, and so Japan has a Valentine's Day where, you buy your girlfriend a gift, and then they have March 14th for White Day, which I feel like is a bit of a controversial name, but they have White Day, which is not where you give white people gifts, but instead, where you give your boyfriend gifts. And if he's white, that's a nice benefit, I guess. But anyway, they have a reverse benefit of that. They have all these fun systems that should be set up for it. But ultimately, people don't want to have children. They want to have AI girlfriends, and I don't actually. I think trying to give any better explanation of why fertility falls when countries get so rich and prosperous is something that is a big struggle for the West. Why are they, wait, was that a couple right there? I think what we need to do is get trucks that go on the street and just yell, have children at people, and if we do that enough, maybe, just maybe, we can reverse the issues. But ultimately, right now, looking at the data, it's pretty bad for Japan. In fact, Japan is the worst on the planet for the declining population because, sure, some countries might be, like, eventually on the way down. Like, oh no, let's look at Jordan. Oh, actually, they're going massively up from all those works there. But, oh yeah, you look at Kazakhstan, or you look at, you look at Cambodia. That's a bad example. You look at Cuba. Oh, look at Cuba's population. It's going to shrink by, like, 30% or something. The same with Croatia, I'm sure. Wow, actually, that's that's almost as bad. There are lots of countries going through this, but Japan is going to be the biggest loss of people. How are they going to deal with such a decline? That's a question for the Japanese to work out. But there's one thing that I can answer on your behalf, which is, should you visit Japan? So this is the UK's travel advice for each country. I think it's just a fun little addition to the series. And usually they give you this big recommendation about terrorism. Here they just say 330,000 British nationals visited Japan in 2018. Most visits are trouble-free. Why did they use 2018? Have they just not updated it? But instead of mentioning about terror, they're like, so there could be continuous risk of earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis. Watch out for all of that. Also, the security situation on the Korean Peninsula can change, and the DPRK has launched numerous missiles towards Japan, and we expect it to continue. So, just watch out for being bombed from North Korea, and you'll be fine. And yeah, if you want to go, by the way, very, very easy. All travelers, you don't need anything. You just got to watch out for medication. You bring the wrong medicine in and you might just die. And as regards to health, just make sure that you don't go while you're pregnant, apparently. That's a useful piece of advice for going anywhere, I guess. And also, if you need medical assistance, dial 119 and ask for an ambulance. That's fun. Anyway, with that said, I think let's read about money, actually. Japan is mainly a cash society. The Japanese currency is the yen. You may have difficulty using credit and debit cards issued outside of Japan. Yeah, so interestingly enough, the world knows there's Visa and there's MasterCard, right? Everywhere uses Visa and MasterCard. Interestingly enough, China has its own one. I think it's UnionPay, and Japan has its own one, which I hope is also not UnionPay, but I think it's JCB. And I think that's incredibly interesting. That's about everything that I can give that's actually useful to you today. The important thing to know is that Japan, as I funnily called it, and I'm going to get some fun bait, is a country that is probably, in terms of if you want a cultural experience, one of the most interesting, not because I think there's anything special about, the things they actually do there, but instead because islands tend to produce much more interesting culture. I'm saying that living on an island, obviously. I've got very strong bias in what I'm about to say, but because, countries that are smushed together tend to start to blur over the lines, and there tends to be not a fine line between the edge of France and the start of Wallonia in Belgium. There tends to be not very fine lines between these cultures. It's a lot harder, whereas an island gives you that real separation. If you've never seen an Asian person in your life, you might struggle and be like, I don't know the difference between Chinese and Korean and Japanese, peoples and cultures, etc. Except actually, you can very easily spot the difference between when Korean ends and Japanese begins, when Taiwanese ends and Japanese begins, and it's an interesting thing that happens, in my opinion, solely because of the ocean. We can make human-based oceans, we can have mountain ranges that work in similar ways, Switzerland's proven that, but I think the ocean is what will mean that if you want to go anywhere, Japan is somewhere I'd recommend going to. Just bring some cash, and also, watch out, because maybe North Korea will bomb you. And also, maybe Japan itself will explode on you. But yeah, if you watch out for those things, you'll do great. Thank you for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. The fact that we got this series going 10 days and we got the uploads going, feeling good about that. But how will the episode K go? I don't know. I'm kind of curious about K. I feel like it can only be Kazakhstan or Kenya. To my mind, Kenya doesn't have that big of a population, and Kazakhstan does. but I bet it's Kenya because every time it's an African country versus a non-African country, it's always the African country that wins. This is a series where we just learn about how the population is slowly amassing in Africa and not the rest of the world, I guess, which is an interesting lesson by itself. But let's see tomorrow and see if I'm wrong as we talk about Kazakhstan. Looking forward to seeing you there. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Wait, first, I have an important announcement to make. Here's something crazy you might not have known. The Ninja 14-in-1 air fryer that I've recommended many times on this channel has proved to be so popular that they have literally sold out on Amazon. You cannot buy one now if you want to. Which means, very sadly, you're going to have to, if you want to get your hands on one, get yourself a 12-in-1 air fryer. I know, it's sad. You lose 2 of those functions. I still can't work out which ones. But if you want to make food, maybe like that you'll find in Japan, and you want to get a great gift for someone you love this holiday season, buy them 12-in-1 air fryers, and then that way, think about it this way, they can do 144 functions. More seriously, if you are like moving out or you're in a situation where you're starting to cook for yourself and you want to learn some stuff, rather than buying a trillion appliances, genuinely this is the best rice cooker I've ever had, and it works as an air fryer, and then it does 10 other things. I have nothing I could recommend more, and so check the link in the description. You get some % off probably if Amazon deems it necessary, and yeah, it'll arrive before Christmas. If you buy now, buy soon. If you care about yourself, you do it. Buy it. You know, everyone buys each other Christmas gifts. Buy yourself a Christmas gift, damn it. Anyway, thank you for watching. Second channel, don't care. Bye.